This episode of the Pain Education Corner is sponsored by the Comella Foundation. The Comella Foundation is committed to relieving pain naturally using osteopathic healing principles. Here at the Comella Foundation, we envision a world where people achieve their maximum potential by being empowered with knowledge and skills to heal themselves and others. This information is to be used for educational purposes only and not to be construed as medical advice. If you have any questions or concerns, please consult a licensed healthcare professional. Hello, it's Bill, the Knee Pain Guru. Welcome to the Pain Education Podcast. We have a special guest today. It's Christina Thevaos? Thevaos, with an X. Christina spelled with an X. Anyhow, Christina, I'd like to welcome you today. You're going to talk about homeopathy as it relates to helping relieve pain. So welcome, Christina. Welcome to the show. And would you introduce yourself? Tell us how you got here.
Well, thanks for inviting me. I really appreciate it. I actually started studying alternative medicine around 1997. I started really just waking up to the idea that the stuff we were being given, even microwaves, like all these things were really harmful. And so that's the year I swore off conventional medication. I swore off any more for myself. I threw out my microwave. I just went radical. And so, I started delving into alternative, anything I could find, like learning about nutrition and supplements. And in 2004, when I met somebody that introduced me to homeopathy, it was like the light bulb went off. And I had found this magic bullet that I'd been looking for, this thing that had the capacity to radically change our health with absolutely no side effects. Mm-hmm. And it was a really profound, shift for me. I've been looking for some kind of modality that like really took in all layers and all levels of our consciousness, our emotions, our physical symptoms, and could actually provide a pathway to cure. Mm. So I, really delved into the study and did an 8-year clinical apprenticeship. And then, with all the kids, I have 5 children. So, within that framework too, I had a lot of experience, practice.
5 kids to practice with.
Oh yeah. So it wasn't just, like friends and family. I mean, we had the gamut of different illnesses, accidents, injuries, emotional stuff, pain of all kinds. And the cool thing about practicing homeopathy on children, especially ones that aren't very vocal, is that there's no placebo effect, because you can hold something under the nose, you can put something in their mouth, and they may or may not stop screaming. But when you give them that remedy, and it's a good remedy, like well chosen for the situation, and the pain disappears, and you see the ease and the relaxation, and their whole personality changes, you can't cry that it doesn't work. Mm-hmm.
So homeopathy, you were introduced to, you did an 8-year internship. That's pretty significant. That's a long time. That's no joke there. What's entailed in an internship with homeopathy?
Well, most people go through schooling. So programs in the United States and around the world are anywhere from 3 to 5 years. Mm-hmm. And so with the way I did it was kind of like an old-fashioned way. It was actually my ex-husband that introduced me to homeopathy as he was a practitioner. And so I was in clinic studying and running the clinic at the same time. But I used every opportunity, every case that he took, to listen and pay very close attention. We talked shop constantly. So I was constantly asking questions. I was studying materia medica and, principles on my own. And then, I would test those theories by, asking him questions about cases, about, following up with clients. So it was a really interesting fine-tuning process. Another thing that is different about the way I learned homeopathy is that I'm not a classically trained homeopath. I know how to prescribe classically, which would be like standard, find all the symptoms, pick one remedy, and go as deep as you can. But the way we were practicing was a little bit revolutionary and very controversial, at least in the beginning days of my studies, was to look for aggravating causes and then to antidote them. So we did this process called reverse chronological tautopathy. So let's say you had some kind of accident, like you had a spinal cord injury and you had a lot of inflammation. And so the doctors prescribed prednisone and muscle relaxants and painkillers. But then you start developing other symptoms like, liver enzymes going crazy. Maybe you're getting mood changes from the medications that you've been on. Maybe you even start to have like some bone deterioration or other nasty side effects from prednisone or whatever. And they don't go away when you stop the medication. So we would use a potentized form, and I'll explain potentization in a minute, of the medicine or the substance that caused the problem to antidote the lingering side effects. Because when you take a drug, you have two kinds of reactions. You have the chemical response. Well, actually, there's multiple. You have the primary action of the drug, which is going to be to turn off the symptoms. Then you have the secondary action of the drug, which is when the symptoms all get worse and the side effects happen. And then when the chemical is actually metabolized out of the system, there are energetic changes that happen in the body system, depending.
I think we're gonna need to back up a little bit and kind of give the listeners an understanding of homeopathy, how it works, kind of like the foundational stuff. Because I know you mentioned materia medica, and that seemed to be, more like foundational stuff to lay out so everybody understands before we get to the reverse chronological tautopathy.
Well, it's actually extremely important in pain. But yeah, so where do you want me to go back to the material?
Well, what is homeopathy? How does it work?
So I like to explain it this way, that conventional medication uses a moderate dose of a medicine or a poison, a toxin, to turn off the symptoms. It views the symptoms in the body as something to get rid of.
Like pain. Let's take pain.
Like pain.
Use that as a real concrete example. I fell and smacked my knee. It's swollen. It hurts. Yeah. I'm going to take, you insert the drug, Tylenol, Advil, Nuprin, Tylenol with codeine if I go to a doctor. I'm trying to think of the other, what was the one that I had with my, begins with a P. Percocet, yes. The one that made me vomit all the time. So I had, it numbed the pain and it made me vomit. So perfect example. Now you take it from a homeopathic perspective, talk about that. Talk about Percocet.
The Percocet is, the primary action is going to turn off your pain receptors so that you don't feel the pain. But because it's so toxic, it causes problems in the liver. It can cause you to vomit. It can cause a whole host of things. So the opposite of using these large doses would use minute doses. And this is where homeopathy comes in. So you use a very tiny dose to stimulate the body's self-reparative mechanisms. And in this small dose, it's just enough to give the body a signal to do what it needs to do to ease the pain without side effects. So it's brilliant. It's really
a simple concept. Maybe we need to go a little bit more, because I know homeopathic remedies are FDA approved.
They are.
and maybe go into a little bit of the history, talk about
Yeah.
the history of homeopathy?
So a lot more than 200 years ago now, a doctor called Samuel Hahnemann in Germany was a conventionally trained medical doctor. We're talking in the age of leeches and mercury and arsenic and very large doses of medicines being used that usually brought the demise of the patient.
Mm-hmm.
He was very not happy with the way things were going, and he kept thinking, he almost quit practicing because he just didn't like the way things were going. And he started experimenting with the concept of, why are we giving a medication? Like, if 10 different people have a cold, why are we giving them the same kind of medication when they each are having different symptoms? And why is quinine or cinchona effective at killing or stopping malaria? Because there was a lot of theories going around. So what he did was take quinine when he was healthy and had no symptoms, and he got sick as a dog. But he carefully recorded the symptoms that came up and realized that the action that the quinine had on him was giving him the symptoms of malaria.
Mm.
And so he theorized that a smaller dose of quinine would actually cured malaria based on the similarity of symptoms.
Okay.
So it became a really important concept of the similar symptoms in homeopathy. So if you've got, like I brought up before, 10 different people with a cold, and they all have different symptoms, we're going to look at different remedies to give them based on their symptoms. And so there's provings that are done in homeopathy. So like, you have clinical trials in conventional medicine where you are giving sick people a medicine to see if everybody gets relief from whatever symptom that they've got.
Mm-hmm.
And then maybe not, the side effects are recorded.
Mm-hmm.
But in homeopathy, for proving, we're going to take a remedy or a medicine, we're going to give it to healthy people, and we're going to keep a very detailed list of the symptoms that are produced,
Mm-hmm.
so that we can then use specifically those symptoms to indicate the remedy when you have a particular set of symptoms.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Individualization is very important.
Cool. So let's take the cold again.
Yeah.
One person has a runny nose. One person has a stuffed up nose. One person has a headache. One person has a fever and chills. The other person, or fever, the other person has chills. So you're talking about all these different types of symptoms. Not everybody, 10 people have a cold, will have different of these symptoms, that there will be a specific remedy for each of those symptoms.
Yes.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah, like arsenic or
Mhm.
arsenicum. And it gets a little like, whoa, you're giving me arsenic. But remember, you're using a very minute dose.
Mhm.
And we'll talk about that in a second.
Mhm.
But arsenic would be indicated for people that have like a runny nose. Maybe their nose is burning, their eyes are watering, they're chilly, they crave warm drinks.
Mhm.
But if somebody has a stuffy nose and they're really warm, and they start to get it starts going down your chest, I may give them bryonia.
Mhm. It
So,
different, each of those that you just listed were different remedies.
yes.
How many different remedies are there?
Oh wow.
Ballpark?
Like 8 to 10,000.
Okay, great. So give people an understanding, give the listeners an understanding of the level of nuance that is offered in homeopathy. And you need someone that, in terms of working with someone, you need someone that has the skill at asking those types of questions to get the nuance of their symptoms, to
Yes.
line them up with the remedy that's going to make the biggest difference with the littlest
Changes
line
in
it up,
indications.
change. Yeah, there you go.
Yeah. So, we're going to ask things like, what makes it better or worse?
Mhm.
Where's the pain? how does it express itself? Like, is it burning, aching, stabbing, shooting? You know, what emotional changes have you experienced with the situation? What happened before you got sick or before the pain started? Was it caused by an accident? Did you have an emotional shock or trauma? Did you get bad news? You know, all these things are very important. You know, it gets so nuanced and so detailed. We want to know like what color your discharges are. Okay. So like what color is your snot?
Wow.
What does it look like? You know, like all of these things are very, very important. Like, how's your thirst? Are you more thirsty or less thirsty than normal?
Okay. Well, cool. Well, let's talk about pain. Let's kind of dig in around pain, because I immediately think of when I work with clients around knee pain, a lot of times that I'll get two camps: people that are specifically stuck in the diagnosis that they've got from the conventional medical doctor, which is like, I have arthritis. Can you do anything for arthritis? Do you have anything for bone on bone? Do you have anything for chondromalacia or tendonitis or tendinosis? You know, and they give me the specific diagnosis.
Yes.
And then other people are like, well, my knee doesn't hurt. It's not in pain. It feels tight. It feels achy. It feels stiff. And so now they get into more of the description of their experience of their knee. So from a homeopathic perspective, I'd like you to really dig in and explain pain in that context, and how homeopathy could help with pain.
Yeah. So homeopathy is a phenomenological approach, which means that the camp number 2, which is going to be very descriptive about their pain, about the tightness, about the swelling, about, you know, it's warm or my knees, you know, cold to the touch. Like those are the nuances and the things that we're going to look for to better treat somebody. You know, your diagnosis in homeopathy is not as important as actually what's happening and how you experience it. Like it's very, very particular about your subjective experience. And so a lot of people, when they first go to a homeopath or, you know, take homeopathic remedies, they're like, oh my gosh, you actually like listen to me. You ask questions. I feel so seen.
Right.
You know, and
heard, listened to. Yeah.
So heard. And so there's automatically that initial response or relief, you know, like, wow, at least I feel like somebody's really paying attention. Because how many of us have gone to the doctor and the doctor maybe gives us 5 minutes. They don't want to know any specifics. They just want to know, like, yes, you know, give a checklist of this, and then they give you a prescription. Yeah. And you're like, but you didn't listen to what I had to say. You didn't ask any questions. So I've actually had the experience now when I had to go to a functional medicine doctor a few years ago because of a issue that I was having, and I needed some testing done. Because I still, you know, as a clinician, I still like to see test results, but they're not as important. Like I said, we're looking at like your experience of the condition that you're going through. But I gave them so many details. They were like, I don't know what to do with all this. I'm like, you know, that's just my thinking, because that's what I'm looking for my own clients.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, you go to a doctor and you know, they're immediately giving you a diagnosis. I was like, well, doc, my leg, lower part of my leg is sitting over there on the counter, and you didn't even notice. But I think that's where there's a mental emotional component that is left unsaid with the conventional medical model of really listening to what's going on to understand how to address what's taken place.
Yeah. You know, there's been studies done that show that 50% it's around 50%, excuse me, of patients are getting better from the placebo effect. But there's also studies that show that drugs like antidepressants are only 50% effective.
Mm.
So, you know, when you start looking at these kind of statistics, then you realize that most drugs just aren't that effective. That there is the element of, well, I'm taking something, so I'm feeling better. You know, I went to the doctor, I did what I needed to do, so now I'm going to heal. And this is a really powerful phenomenon because at the same time, when I'm looking as a clinician for causes, and I'm looking at emotional causes in particular, or somebody's coming to me with that, you see that when they've got an emotional cause, look what happened. They develop physical symptoms. Okay, so if we can develop them because of some kind of insult to our system or our, you know, emotions, our ego, whatever, then we can also heal them by looking at those emotions and letting them go.
Yeah.
Sometimes we need a little more prompting though, because the unpacking, trust me on this one, can be kind of difficult.
Yeah. And just everybody's listening, we're not proposing anything that's curing or healing. Like your body does it itself. Your body has all of the innate knowledge and intuition to do it itself. Sometimes you need somebody in that equation, a professional, a practitioner in that equation that helps guide your body along that process. So it does the healing for us. It does all the heavy lifting for what what you need addressed in your physical body.
Absolutely. You know, sometimes it's hard for us to see what's right in front of us too. So, you know, when you have that mirror of working with somebody, you know, then things can be pointed out that you're like, oh, wait a minute. You know, I hadn't thought of it that way. I hadn't seen that, you know, it didn't occur to me. And that can be really, really helpful. And like what you do, Bill, with helping people release tension. You know, we get stuck in those tension patterns and we forget. It's like having the thorn in your side for like years and years and years. You kind of forget it's there. And you're like, God, you know, I don't know why I'm so uncomfortable. Like I'm, you know, like this anymore, you know, like all the time. And you forget like, oh yeah, you know, you had this exciting cause here.
Okay. I got a question for you. I've never really, I've told stories about it to my clients, but I've never understood it. So I had ACL reconstruction in my left knee, pin in my tibia, pin in my femur, bone in my lower leg and upper leg. They sliced a part of my patella tendon out, my kneecap tendon, and recreated the ligament that I tore in my left knee. They also took out 2 pieces of meniscus. Now, in my healing process, the Percocet didn't work at all. You know, the vomiting and all that. So the conventional medical model, I was done with it after the surgery. I was just wanting to get the anesthesia out of my system as quickly as possible because I felt so out of sorts with all of that. In my healing process, though, the scar, we would have humid days. I lived in Kentucky, humid as all get out in Louisville, Kentucky. The only thing that would sweat on my body was the scar. Never like it didn't make sense. I'm looking at my leg. The only thing that is actually dripping sweat is the surgery scar.
Interesting.
Have any insight on that one? Anything?
I mean, those are the kind of peculiar, rare and peculiar symptoms that a homeopath can be like, interesting. Because those are the particular ones that are going to lead us to a specific remedy. I mean, like even those kind of nuanced details are what we're looking for. Like anything like that is when you, especially when you have specific symptoms like that, we're almost guaranteed to find a really good remedy that's going to alleviate your symptoms.
And what occurs to me is that someone who's looking for help with pain would never even think to tell you about the surgery scar sweating. Like it seems like an irrelevant, disconnected part of like, well, I'm going to this woman who's a homeopath, and I want her to help me with the pain in my knee.
Right.
Help me with the pain in my knee, but I would never mention the swelling, the stiffness, the tension in my hips and lower back, the limping that I'm doing, the fatigue, the lack of sleep,
Exactly.
like all of that other stuff that goes along with the fact that my knee hurts goes into what I understand a homeopath does in terms of drawing out the information from me to get the specific remedy that's going to make the biggest difference in relieving the pain. Is that?
Yeah. So when somebody comes to me, I'm going to give them time to express everything they want to express. Then I'm going to go back and start asking loaded questions. Okay. Like I'm going to ask them pointed questions about, like, we're going to go from head to toe.
Mm-hmm.
Like I'm going to get specific. They say, okay, I've got pain in the knee. I'm going to go back and ask them a lot of questions about that experience. And, you know, we're going to just explore every avenue and get as much information as we can. You know, that's, so we have standard questions that we ask. And then of course, as the situation pertains, there's going to be more specific questions that we ask, you know, for the
Mm-hmm.
situation. So you don't have to know everything, you know, just have a general idea and, you know, the homeopath will lead you through the rest.
Sure. And I think the piece is to take the pressure off of the person to think they need to know everything, as well as know that everything is on the table. Like nothing can be disregarded in terms of the conversation, for them not to think, it has nothing to do with my knee. I think that's a good.
Yeah, that's a great point. You know, I mean, when I'm looking, so if you were to come to me with knee pain or some other kind of pains,
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to talk about mental, emotional. I'm going to ask you about your digestive tract and
Mm-hmm.
your bowel movements. I'm going to ask you about your sleep. I'm going to ask you about your dreams. You know, so there's several ways that we approach a case. Like one is going to be like to increase your overall state of health. Because a lot of times we're experiencing pain in certain areas because the whole system is off.
Mm-hmm.
But then sometimes, you know, there's an accident or injury. And so you have a targeted area where there's pain, but it's still valuable and useful for me as a clinician to know, like, what are your tendencies in general? Like, what are your normal responses to pain? Like, what are your overall, like, where's your level of health at right now? Which is going to point me in the direction of how to approach the case.
Mm-hmm.
Because maybe it's going to be the case where we use a specific protocol specifically targeting the pain.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe we also do like general constitutional treatment to raise your overall level of health. Because
Mm-hmm.
the higher your vibration, okay, like the higher your level of health, the
Mm-hmm.
less susceptible you are to all kinds of chronic illnesses,
Mm-hmm.
including pain.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. The body has the capacity, more of a capacity to heal itself because we've upped the bar on its ability to do so. Yeah, I get it. Now, talk about.
I'm going to turn off my heater real fast.
Okay. Different types of pain. There could be chronic pain, there could be acute pain, there could be sharp pain or dull pain or ache. Could you kind of like brief over or talk through those components? So those who are dealing with stuff like, for instance, I'm thinking of one of our previous guests, Gene Smithson, who was shot 5 times. Like that was one of his situations or scenarios, which is not the average person's experience with pain. So he had some very acute stuff that was going on, as well as a lot of emotional components of when that happened.
Right.
You know, as opposed to somebody who has had a knee replacement surgery that is struggling with range of motion, it just aches all the time.
Okay, that's really good. That's good. Yeah, let's start with the knee replacement.
Mhm.
Um,
It'll be
I
easier.
yes, it is easier. Um, I actually had a couple of clients that had knee replacement um, operations, and I got to work with them post surgery. And so it is simpler because you are there's multiple things going on, with surgery. You have the incision, you have the bruising and swelling and the trauma to the pieces and parts that are being pulled apart and the bone being cut, and like the recovery and the tendons being stretched and everything. So that's very targeted type of treatment.
Mhm.
Usually there's not as much emotional stuff, although some people can be emotionally scarred by going into surgery, because it can be a very fearful experience. You're being put under, you don't have control, like you're having trauma done to your body. So there's a lot less. There's also, your body responds quicker because you just had this from the start of the surgery until like the healing is complete. Okay, so you have a shorter time span of treatment, so treatment goes faster.
Mhm.
So let's go back to the example of the guy that was shot 5 times.
Mhm.
So you have a much longer duration, which treatment is kind of proportional to the length of time that something's been going on.
Mhm.
But bodies can respond very quickly. Sometimes you're totally surprised by how quickly somebody responds. But you have PTSD,
Mhm.
okay? Because getting shot, that's a traumatic experience. You
Mhm.
have, the chronic pain, you have scar tissue. You may have organ damage. You may have fragments of the bullets
Mhm.
remaining. All these things can be addressed. It just takes a
Mhm.
little bit longer.
Sure.
Getting shot 5 times really kicks your butt on vitality. It's going to really lower your vitality. And even having the experience of having chronic pain for a long time lowers your vitality. So there's a little bit of work to do to build you back up. And sometimes, in addition to the homeopathy, we find some supplements can be really helpful too, because you get nutritional deficiencies. Chronic medication, chronic pain meds, which a lot of people are often on with having chronic pain, also cause imbalances. So we look at those things too, and at least for me, like, I'll address those as well.
Mhm. I think there's a piece that was very much a factor for me in my experience with the knee. That was a huge emotional component that went on much longer than the surgery.
Mhm.
I know there's a place where if a person has a knee replacement surgery, they had the emotional impact of the surgery, the PTSD that they may have experienced because of the surgery. But I think there's this who we are as humans, standing as people, as a man in the world or a woman in the world. Who we are is directly related to our ability to stand, to move, to walk, to run, if we need to save our own life or save the life of other people or just get stuff
Yes.
done. I think
Yes.
that's a component in pain, that when we feel like we're this crippled, like, oh, I can't reach to go get this off the top shelf because I'm afraid
Yes.
it's going to hurt more.
I mean, this is a great point, because and I had this happen myself because I had a very long battle with chronic fatigue and fibromyalgia.
Mhm.
And there is a very real component to pain where you have depression, you
Mhm.
have feelings of worthlessness, you have hopelessness, you have
Right.
all the other emotions, like, I can't do what I used to do, I'm a failure, I can't take care of myself, who's going to take care of me now? Oh my gosh, now I'm anxious because I don't know how this is going to look going forward. I don't know how
Work
to do.
out. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a
And
lot.
yeah, so it's not uncommon that it's not just I'm irritable because of the pain. Okay. It's
Mhm.
irritable because, oh my God, now I can't do this. I can't perform. I'm not the man I used to be. I can't take care of my children. I can't be a good wife. I mean, there's so much. And these are the things that we go into in the homeopathic appointment.
Mhm.
I want to know what's going on for you mentally and emotionally. Like, what's your personality like? What do you see yourself as your ideal self? And where are you now?
Mhm.
And all this is taken into consideration in how we proceed forward with treatment, because pain is a complex issue, especially when you deal with chronic pain.
Mhm. Yeah, I got a story when it was it was the first time I took a bath after my knee surgery.
Mhm.
And the way the bathtub was, I had to get in with my bad leg towards the back wall. And I got in fine. The problem was I couldn't get out. And it may not seem like that big a deal, but when you're in your late 20s and you're male and you're physically stuck in the bathtub because you don't have the leverage and the strength to get yourself out of the tub,
Yeah.
and the people that are there helping you aren't strong enough to do that. It's like this incredibly embarrassing, oh my gosh, it's like a miserable place to be, because it's like, how can I not get myself out of the tub? So yeah, it's there are components that go into pain that a lot of times people don't even take into consideration. And from the Western medical component, will never, ever be heard, talked to, discussed, listened to. You won't even get close to that
Right.
level of
You
conversation.
don't, yeah, you don't need to be on anti-anxiety drugs and antidepressants because you're in pain. You need your freaking symptoms relieved.
And a forklift to get me out of the tub.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So I want to just bring up real fast the power of homeopathy in pain relief, because a lot of people are like, oh, maybe this works, maybe it doesn't. So two examples that are coming to mind, like the two knee replacement surgeries, that's actually going to be one example.
Okay.
We, in the first case, I tried one technique and then I refined it in the second case. In the first case, we reduced the pain meds by 50%.
Oh,
And
so
the
this
healing,
was let me pause you for a second.
yeah,
So this was a client that you were working with that had double knee replacement.
no, they had two different times, knee replacements, two different times. So like one at a time, individually.
Both of their knees were replaced, or they had the same knee replaced twice.
Both of their knees were replaced at different times.
Got it. Okay, perfect. Good.
So
And their pain level was
pretty high when we started, and the pain
okay.
meds were not doing much
Touching
for
it.
them.
Okay.
So with the homeopathic treatment, we reduced the pain meds by about 50%.
Reduce the pain or the pain meds?
Well, the pain, so that they only were taking the meds
Half
like
the
half the
amount.
time.
Okay.
But you know what else happened?
Hmm.
The constipation went away. Their mood improved. Their healing was far exceeded what the doctor had initially thought was going to happen. In fact, the doctor was so impressed, they wanted to know what they'd been doing. And the client was afraid to tell them that she'd been working with a homeopath because she didn't know, how they were going to respond.
Isn't that I find that strange that anybody would have to have that level of reservation to share with someone else that they're working with, be it a doctor, be it another practitioner, be it their family, friends, loved ones, that they would ever have to have any level of reservation of sharing what they're doing that is working.
Yeah. I've
bet you
seen
there's
it
a remedy. There's a remedy for that.
I know, right? I've seen it over and over and over again. So the second time, when she had the second replacement done, I tried a different technique of prescribing, which was far more effective. And it was, which I'm not going to go into because it's not relevant in this topic that we're talking about right now, but we reduced her pain so much that she hardly took any pain meds. And it was just, it sped the healing up even more. Like it was a much quicker recovery.
Let me ask you something in terms of from a professional perspective. when you say you prescribe,
Mhm.
many times that is considered a no-no by the professional medical model, that you are not allowed to prescribe unless you're a doctor.
Right.
You're a licensed healthcare professional.
That is
How,
correct.
what is the languaging that is required in the homeopathic realm? If I'm talking to a doctor, they're saying they're prescribing stuff,
Right.
that's cool with them. But if a person practicing homeopathy, massage therapist, whoever it is, prescribing may not be the terminology that would be looked at as being acceptable.
So
What is the, where
yeah,
are you guys at with that?
in the United States, professional homeopaths such as myself do not have any licensure that is recognized by the state or the federal government.
Mm-hmm.
We do have independent certifying bodies,
Mm-hmm.
2 different bodies in the United States, but they're not recognized by the government.
Okay.
In other countries like India, they
Mm-hmm.
have homeopathy is completely recognized by the health care system and the government.
Mm-hmm.
And so their homeopaths are licensed. And most homeopaths actually in India are actually considered doctors, and they get,
Mm-hmm.
5+ years of training, and they can even do minor surgeries. So it's a very different way of looking at it here. It's not to lessen what the effectiveness of what a homeopath in America can practice, or their clinical results versus what they're doing in India. Is just a matter of the legal jargon. So not being licensed in the United States means I can't prescribe, diagnose, treat, recommend
Mm-hmm.
anything.
Sure.
So I basically come and work with you as an educational consultant.
Mm-hmm.
You're treating yourself. I don't prescribe anything, but I may have suggestions based on my experience.
Got it. So that you had said prescribe specifically. So I just wanted to make sure there wasn't any confusion
Yes.
for anybody watching this, that you're prescribing. So
Yeah.
that's important.
In the context of educating, you can kind of say you have more freedom in what you can and can't say. But in the context of working with somebody, you have to be really careful what you do.
Sure. Gotcha. And that's like, because it's the same thing. I do online coaching and training.
Mm-hmm.
And this is what I would do if your knee hurt in this part of the knee.
Yes.
And that was something from my background in training, that I needed to make sure my languaging was specific in a certain way as to avoid any ambiguity or legal vulnerability as a result of what may or may not come out of my mouth. So
Yes,
anyhow,
we do have to be careful. Is now a good time to come back to the second example of pain relief from that I was going to give earlier?
which
So I was giving the example of the knee replacement surgery.
Yes, sure.
And then the second example was C-sections.
Oh, okay.
And so I personally had my first 2 children were born by a C-section.
Mm-hmm.
And with homeopathic remedies, and this again, just to remind you guys, is to demonstrate how effective homeopathic remedies really are.
Mm-hmm.
So when you have a childbirth, when you give birth to a baby, it's painful.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And you've got a lot of like discomfort to deal with just from the actual process of birthing a baby.
Mm-hmm.
Then when you have a C-section, you have the additional insult of having major abdominal surgery on
Mm-hmm.
top of all the labor and on top of all the massive changes that have just happened to your body. So it gets kind of complicated and it's very uncomfortable. Plus you're trying to nurse and you've got all this discomfort. With the homeopathic remedies for both C-sections, and I've had a lot of pain in my life, but I had no pain meds. I had to take no pain meds. I completely managed all the recovery and all pains with homeopathic remedies.
With both C-sections.
C-sections, major abdominal surgery.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I wish I could say, oh yeah, they didn't even have to numb me to do the surgery, but
That wasn't the
homeopathy is
case.
not that good. But I actually, this is really interesting example here. Dental drilling for fillings. I have had numerous clients that have gone through with no anesthetic and had their fillings or their cavities drilled out with only using homeopathic remedies. They would put their hand up and they would take a sniff or take a drop of the remedy in their mouth and, you know, let the dentist start drilling again. And so it's very powerful. It's very, very powerful.
Oh, good. I just remember as a teenager, they did the shot in my jaw, and I remember trying to drink water after I got home, and it just like, I just poured it all over myself because I couldn't feel my lip.
Okay, so this is a great way to come back to what I was first talking about with using remedies to antidote, because sometimes there's lasting side effects and lasting effects that prevent our body from healing properly.
Yes.
So like the long-term effects of anesthetic or pain meds. And so our body never quite gets back into the place where it can go back into its natural healing process. So there's a technique we can use in homeopathy where we take that substance and we use like that cause like lidocaine. Okay, let's say you've been given shots of lidocaine and that's what numbed you up and your body's not getting over the reaction. Well, we can go back and give you that in a potentized or homeopathic form. And it helps your body go back to normal and the numbness go away and everything come back right again.
So this was the reverse chronological tetopathy?
That's good. Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Which is a totally complicated way of just saying antidoting the long-term effects of drugs and medication, which is so much
got it.
simple.
Yeah, because there's so many people that are taking multiple medications for pain. And I believe I read this somewhere, some sort of report that if a person is on 5 medications, the symptoms that they have are not even from the original issue. They're all from the medication that they're taking.
Oh my gosh, I've had so many cases in clinic where what was presenting was literally a compound snowball effect of side effects from the medications they were on. Like I had a seizure case where they were having hundreds of seizures a day. So we started the treatment and they were wanted to get off the medications. So they started weaning themselves. They got off one. They were on 3 different ones. They got off the first one. The seizures went down to 25 a day. They got off the second one. They went down to 5 a day. When we got off the first one, and this is also going back and antidoting the effects after the drug had metabolized out of the system. When they got off the first one, they were down to 1 a day. And so after a few months of treatment, they were seizure free. And even after 2 years, they had no more seizures. So it's very, the side effects of drugs are very real and very crippling and debilitating to our system. Another thing that can happen is with all the amounts of pain medicines we get, there's multiple studies that show that they inhibit the body's ability to heal.
Okay. For me personally, I pretty much, if I could figure it out from an herbal perspective or homeopathic perspective, I'm going to do it that way. It isn't even in my mind to do prescriptions or go to the doctor and have them put me on something, because how I feel when I start taking any sort of medication, it's awful. I don't even feel normal on any level. So I stay away from it altogether. But for those people that may reach out to you, and they're on medications and they're under a doctor's care, what would be the proper protocol to begin working with a homeopath like yourself in conjunction with a doctor with the intention to relieve the pain and get off these medications?
So I'm looking as a homeopath at root causes. Okay, so if you've got diabetes, we're going to look at, we're going to approach the case differently than if we're coming for pain. But actually, let me take that back, because everything we're going to look at from, like I said, the root causes. Let's answer this a little differently, Bill. When you are coming for treatment, like, the overall situation and state that you're in is going to be very important to
when you would be coming for
yeah,
support, because doctors treat and prescribe and recommend, so they're getting support.
They are. So I'm going to look at like what you're on and like where you are right now. Okay, because if you are, like, each case is going to be different. Whatever medicines you're on are, going to be looked at and factored in. We may give you more frequent dosing of remedies, or, depending on how intense your symptoms are. Like, this, everything's individualized. So it's kind of difficult to answer the question without like looking at each person's case. But I do work with what you're giving me. Okay. Like, if you're working under the care of a doctor, we're going to be very cognizant of that. And if you feel comfortable wanting to try to get off medications, if that's what you want, then I'm going to help support you in that. My goal, everything that I do in my practice is to lead you back to freedom of health, freedom of emotional states, and like into your emotional sovereignty, and freedom of, like, on all levels, so that you feel like you're not under a burden anymore. You're not being a burden to the system. You're not being a burden to your family. Like, these are really, really important. And so anything that I can do to get you on that path is what we're going to work with. I can't make you or suggest that you stop taking medications. Like, you need to do that under doctor's care. But the goal, what we're doing in treatment, is ultimately going to make you healthy enough that you can start weaning back, and the doctors eventually do see that. And you can, cut back on the medications, and it your overall health improves, like we said earlier, and everything just lightens up. You don't have the burden that you were under before.
Yeah.
It's really a beautiful process.
Well, I think the big thing that's not being said here is the patient is ultimately in control. The patient is the one that can make the decision. And that's where I believe that people who have been under doctor's care for an extended period of time forget that. They think the doctor knows best all the time. And they do know best for certain things in certain situations, but ultimately your health is up to you. And you have to bring these different people into the equation so you become healthier. And you can say, hey, I want to, the person that is in pain can say, hey, I want to do something different. This is what I'm doing to whoever it is, whether it be the doctor or be a homeopath or an herbalist or naturopath or chiropractor or massage therapist, whoever it is. They ultimately have to make the choice as to the direction they want to go in.
Yeah. And so this actually brings up a really good point, that a lot of people go initially to the doctor or become under treatment because they have anxiety about having the pain. Pain for people can be scary. Okay, so let me give you another example from my personal situation, because this is a really big example. I've had, since 2003 or 4, I've had over 130 gallstones that I've passed. Gallstone colics are freaking painful. Sometimes they can last for 4, 5, 6 hours. Now, most people, when they're in this level, like we're talking like 8, 9, 10 level of pain, are going to be, wanting to be like, I need relief now. Something's very, very wrong. I need to go to the doctor. I need help. And even when you have, like chronic low back pain or chronic knee pain, and I'm not saying this to belittle anybody. So I don't want this to come across as being condescending or anything, because pain can be scary. Okay. I mean, how many of you have had a bad migraine and you're like, I need to go to the doctor because it's that intense of pain? I totally understand. But a lot of what drives us to the doctor is our anxiety about how to get a hold of the situation. So my lack of going to the doctor and going through all these gallstone colics and still having my gallbladder was because through the remedies, through understanding the process that was going on in my body, through trusting that if my body produced the gallstone, my body could get rid of the gallstone, and of complete stubbornness that I wasn't going to have my gallbladder removed. So my commitment to finding a solution, these were the things that led me to keep trying homeopathic remedies, which always brought me back to health and brought me relief. Now, the reason, and it's a whole other discussion, but it's relevant to this, why I still had 130 gallstone colics. And it's actually very important to the discussion on chronic pain. But so, yeah, we lose our freedom when we have fear. Now, that's not to say that there aren't situations where you do need to go and get medical attention. Absolutely. And it's good that we still have those options, but we have other solutions that we can try when you have the resources, like having a good homeopath. We can have, and in fact, I recommend that, I can say this because it's not a treatment related, but I strongly suggest that everybody I work with have a home remedy kit of 50 to 100 remedies. Because when you have accidents, injuries, colds, flus, vomiting, food poisoning, bee stings, things like this, you can have the remedy right at hand with a little bit of training, a couple of books, or even by calling a homeopath, you're going to have the remedy right on hand and can treat it immediately yourself. So these, when you have these tools, you have more control of your own health and your freedom as a result of it.
Yeah. Go ahead.
I love the idea of homeopathy and other like herbal remedies, essential oils and things as like a prepper type of medicine. I think when we think about like being self-sufficient, we don't think about as much of like, how can we treat ourselves at home? We're like, oh, we should have antibiotics stockpiled. We should have pain meds, and we should have, like some steroids on hand just in case things come up. But there's so many other over-the-counter solutions available that with a little bit of training, we have an immense amount of health freedom.
Yeah, totally agree. And I think when people start just taking little baby steps to begin to work with these tools, whatever level that is, begin to bring those people into their life and break it down into bite-sized chunks that they could begin to empower themselves and know, oh, I could use that for when I get stung with a bee. And oh, I could use that when I get a headache, instead of popping Tylenol, Advil, Nuprin, and all that kind of stuff. Then I could get more of my arms around this situation, and it doesn't seem like a daunting task when I do have a gallstone or whatever that might be.
In fact, I'm actually editing a homeopathic book that a colleague of mine wrote on self-treatment for colds, flus, the current pandemic, and first aid. And it'll be available in another couple of months. And so we're really excited to have that project, coming to completion. But yeah, I mean, homeopathy is super powerful, and it is a complete system of medicine. It is wide reaching in what we can deal with. In fact, It's so effective for pain and even for the results of chronic head injuries.
Mm-hmm.
And, like traumatic brain injuries is what I actually meant to say. It's super effective, but let's come back to pain.
Cool. Well, I think we're gonna tie up today's call. We've been going pretty good here for about an hour-ish. But if someone who's watching this would want to reach out to you, that would be okay for them, and you do work with clients remotely, so you can work with anybody wherever they are in the world.
I do. Yeah.
Perfect.
We do video calls, or we can work phone if that works best for you.
Mhm.
So yeah, I'm available.
We'll set all that up down below this video on the Comella Foundation website. We'll make sure we get all that added to this, as well as information in the description of the video for those who would want your contact information. We got that before the show, so we'll definitely include that as well. Christina, I want to thank you for taking your time and sharing your expertise and knowledge with myself and with the listeners of the show. Is there anything else you want to put a bow on this call today?
Well, the one thing I wanted to say, just to finish up the gallbladder thing, because this is tying back into the whole pain and getting to the root causes and why we end up suffering so much. It wasn't until I really started addressing why I was so angry and getting to some of these root emotional causes, which the homeopathic remedies, when I switch, I actually go to a homeopath myself. And every homeopath I know has a homeopath that treats them. When we start really addressing these things inside ourselves, when we start looking into our emotions and really trying to be more free of these burdens that we're carrying, our levels of pain just drop so drastically. There is no amount of pain that we're being in that doesn't have some kind of emotional cause. Like, even if you have a knee injury, the severity of the experience that you're going to have is directly proportionate to the stuck emotions that you're holding on to. I didn't want to believe this for a very long time. And I tried to ignore it, but it just kept coming back up. So that's why I love homeopathy so much, because it not only helps with the experience of the sensation of pain, but it also helps you to deal with like everything in your life. Everything becomes easier. Life looks happier. It's a really nice modality.
Awesome. Great.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. This is Bill Paravano, the knee pain guru, on behalf of the Comella Foundation for the Pain Education Podcast. Appreciating you for being here. Have a wonderful day, and we will see you on the next one. Thank you for tuning into this week's segment of the Pain Education Corner. Join us next week for another conversation on natural healing methods to eliminate pain. To learn more about the work we do at the Comella Foundation, please visit our website at the Comella, Comella Foundation.org.